Ladies and gentlemen, Mollusk here, and I thought I'd give a quick hot take on Skatha in her new Season 4 form. So Skatha is my favourite Guild Ball captain, she's what got me into the game. I was initially going to go Fisherman, but right at the moment I was making my decision, Skatha's box set came out, and they looked so cool. And the idea that they'd have a passing football style, particularly represented by that snowball ability, just won it for me. And so the romance blossomed, and it was a difficult romance. I'm not a great Guild Ball player, and I found playing Skatha in Season 3 very challenging, as did many others I talked to, but I always loved her playstyle. I always really enjoyed putting her on the field and getting her to run around, dodge through the crowds, and feel the wind in my hair as I flubbed a tackle or missed a goal.
I've been playing a bit of Theron recently, trying to get him up to 20 games, and whilst he's pretty strong and fun enough to play, it doesn't really give me quite what I'm looking for, and I find I enjoy games I lose with Skatha more than games I win with Theron. Divana and the Falconers I really quite like, so I'm going to keep playing them for sure, but I am really looking forward to going back to Skatha, as her Season 4 changes make her look super fun. I'm not going to do any read-through of the cards, you can all do that yourselves. I'm going to talk about the changes that interest me and my thoughts about them. So what have we got with this new Skatha? First thing to talk about is the 7-9 move. She used to be a 5-7 move, so those extra 2 inches to the jog and sprint really make a difference. And this is the change I bet is going to be most impactful on every turn, because it's always there. And when I think of how flexible and amazing J-Car is with the same movement stat, I'm just super happy Skatha's got it. The thread extension is super legit. At this kind of range, it's quite hard. It's like a 10-inch threat range. It's kind of hard for the opponent to play around and stay out of that. It gives her that just a little bit of extra distance to negotiate various model bases or terrain features to get to where she needs to be. As with her 1-inch melee and dive into scrum kind of play style, that fine positioning ability really, it really comes into effect a lot and can make or break her activation sometimes. So on top of that, we've also, she obviously gets faster with fast ground, and she always gets her fast ground as we've retained Nature's Chill ability, putting her up to jog 9, sprint or charge 11. And I'm going to come back to that, but just to say, that is some serious speed, with a move and engage threat range of 16 inches, and a 21-inch linear kick threat that's before you consider all the dodges she can do. With those dodges, you should be able to sink a goal from about 26 inches out, really without too much trouble, which really gives us some goal scoring comfort. So consider the kickoff pressure here from just from the movement trait, where you've got Skatha who can kick off and go those 7 inches up and be really quite far forward, but you can also have J-Car in the team, have Veteran Minx in the team, both with those 7-9 movement stats. Zerola Midnight Offering's one of them forward, and suddenly you're covering a huge amount of the pitch. Now at the time I'm doing this video, I don't yet know what changes will happen to the other players, and so keep that in mind for the rest of this video. I'm going on the assumption that the other players don't change too drastically when considering how Skatha may interact with them or how the team might function. One thing to look out for with this spanky-danky extra movement is that it will be possible to move Skatha out of range of where she can kick, create a snowball and pass back to her friendly if she's kicking off, and a little bit for when she's moving around generally. It's something I'm going to forget, but Skatha always likes to have someone within 6 inches of her, and we might have to be a little bit careful now. The other slight disadvantage to this extra movement is when you get lured or other abilities like Puppet Master or stuff like that, they're now slightly more dangerous as she can be pulled further out of position potentially. But it's a trade-off I'm more than happy with. So as I mentioned, Nature's Chill, let's cover that quickly now. So it's pretty much the same as before, except that you now don't have to put it outside of 2 inches of terrain feature. And if you don't normally play hunters, maybe that's not a big deal to you. I personally feel that's more important than it first appears. because it really opens up the flexibility of where you can place it. But more than that, hunters have abilities that make them quite good in terrain, and they like to hide there because other opponent guilds don't tend to have those same qualities. Hiding in a forest, for example, will slow an enemy down. Maybe you can kind of put yourself in such a way that, I don't know, boar can't charge you, but you can still move around and get to where you need to go. Given our players tend to be on the squishier side with, average defensive stats, although maybe that's slightly shifting now, using terrain to our advantage is a big part of our play. So before, when I was stood in the forest and then trying to wangle the angles, try to get that fast terrain in a spot where I could make use of it, I now get much better control over where it can go, and so therefore where my hunters can go, and where I can place it so as not to benefit my opponent, as they still receive the benefit from it. Which is a bit disappointing, but keeps it interesting. So yeah, I like those changes. So let's get back to the really big guns. Skatha's Blessing of the Moon Goddess. In Season 3, this was crap. Bluntly put. 4-inch range, couldn't target herself, and gave you a 1-inch dodge on your next successful play. The consensus was that this was garbage. I agree. I did actually use it a couple of times to decent effect, I think, in helping Minx dodge out the distance she needed to free herself up to get a charge at some point, something like that, but literally just once or twice. The range was too limiting and the benefit was too small to be worth one of Skatha's influence. This changes in a big way, because, well, the range has stayed the same, so it's still quite limited, but she can now target herself, meaning that that's not necessarily such an issue. And in a surprise move that I wasn't expecting, Steamforged have given us a 2-inch dodge, which essentially makes her playbook, and potentially anyone else's, quite bananas. And I think a lot of her turns, or at least important turns, will be based around how she's going to use this ability. So this is a good opportunity to introduce some of her playbook changes, notably this momentous tackle on column 1. Previously, one of the biggest troubles I had with Skatha was getting her to get the frickin' ball off something, as with tack 5 and tackle on 2 against a 4-1 model, there's about 50% chance that I'd be successful, with not very many options for getting extra dice, because Skatha's hunters tend to like to spread out and so don't generate crowd outs, and with 1-inch melee, quite often I was getting dice knocked off for being crowded out myself. Now with the tackle on 1, and a momentous tackle at that, getting the ball is much easier with Skatha. Much, much easier. But it's not just a momentous tackle, is it? It's a momentous tackle double dodge with her Blessing of the Moon Goddess. Holy fuck damn, that is good on 1 success. Not only does that get you the ball and get you out of counter attack range of models even with a 2-inch melee, that gets you 3 inches closer to the goal, and potentially through other people's melees as well, to get you free to go off and play some football with momentum to take a shot if you so need. So getting the ball is what Skatha is going to be looking to do pretty much most turns, and I think maybe that's why she's an attacking midfielder rather than a striker, because she is ball retrieval par excellence, at least as far as hunters go. But let's say you don't want to tackle the ball, or somehow Skatha's out of range to tackle the ball. You get a momentous triple dodge on 1 success if you use the Blessing on herself, and a non-momentous quadruple dodge on 2 successes, which isn't, out of the bounds of possibility. I mean, a double dodge on any result is always going to, is never going to be a bad thing, but really, I think most of the other results, it's more or less gravy, and what you're really looking for is using it with the intention of taking a first column result. Spending an influence to apply the Blessing, and which means you ideally don't want to be spending influence on charging or sprinting, and with her movement you just want to be able to walk up to someone, take a low die attack, and fairly confidently hit the result on the on column 1. But hey, 2 damage, double dodge momentously, never did J-Car any harm. And there's potential for even more J-Car-like pinballing around if you wrap. So you can get like a 2 damage triple dodge, for example, or knockdown triple dodge, or cold snap, whatever. Just charge something isolated and low defense, or knockdown, snared, and ganged up on. As I mentioned, you don't have to use it on Skatha, and you can use it on Skatha and other people at the same time because it's not once per turn. Probably wouldn't spend her influence doing it on more than one other person. I'm quite interested to see what Ulfa's playbook is like, as it might be he might quite like a blessing. But yeah, as I said, there's not really many results that don't benefit from a double dodge. But some particular examples I can think of, providing things don't change too much, is I think Veteran Minx will get a pretty good triple dodge counter attack. J-Car will obviously amp his pinballing up massively, which could really help, as he does rely on that given his short stubby little arms. Matagi, hot shot dodge, sounds pretty good on a goal run, and allowing Cena to more easily disengage from a bundle where people are trying to shut her down is obviously a good thing. I think most of the hunters in their current form will get a tackle double dodge on 2 successes, and Minerva will get some dodges which he completely lacks currently. So I can see that being useful in certain situations where a particular model needs to escape from a sticky situation. But mostly I think you'll use it on Skatha herself before she runs in and does some magic football. Whilst we're on the subject of incredible dodging, let's talk about Skatha's legendary play, Winter's Night. So this is super good, and it always was, but now it's even better. So this used to give all enemy players within a 6-inch aura a little token that you could then exchange for adding an extra dodge to your playbook result. And now anyone within 6 inches of Skatha, any friendly model within 6 inches of Skatha, including Skatha herself, will always get a dodge on the playbook result during the legendary turn. So the benefit of the old way of doing it was that as the tokens were on enemy players, as the enemy spread out around the pitch over the course of the turn, you could still potentially use the tokens to get the dodge over effectively a wider potential area. The downside was you could only do it once, and typically I found there was a particular player that I wanted to I would have liked to have had an extra dodge on kind of multiple times per over the course of the turn, and the rest of the team having the markers didn't tend to matter too much. So whilst potentially the kind of area of effect that the new Winter's Night has is smaller than the previous one, it's going to be so much more useful, I predict, going forwards. Quite simply, Skatha puts it up at the start of her activation, and then every single attack she makes, she gets an extra dodge added to it. So we've got a double dodge momentously on 1 success, triple dodge on 2. Add that with Blessing the Moon Goddess, and you've now got a quadruple dodge on 1. Yeah, it gets silly. 5 dodges on 5 inches of dodge on 2. On top of being able to sprint over 11 inches over fast ground and get a dodge from a pass and go, it just gets silly. You're going to be able to run rings around the enemy players. And not to mention that friendly models will be getting those benefits too. So, Minx running past or around the outskirts of Skatha's aura can hit players multiple times and get dodges added on each one of those attacks. J-Car super pinball turn coming up, etc. For counterattacks, it's more or less the same, I think. Hunters have great counterattacks, but they rarely get to use them. Veteran Minx being an exception, as she's got the reach. Ultimately doesn't change things too much, although the enemy can move out of Skatha's aura to avoid letting you have that bonus, I guess. Another potential disadvantage is it sort of encourages hunters maybe to bunch up a little bit to get the bonus, and bunching up with Skatha's hunters tended in Season 3 to be not so good, I found at least. But as I said earlier, Skatha tends to want to have a friend or two within 6 inches of her, so it's probably not that bad. It's quite a usable distance, I feel. And Skatha being pushed around might be annoying, but again, you've always got Zarola and her Midnight Offering to reposition her if you need to, which could be pretty fun. And finally, there might be situations where you need extra dodge, but you also need your influence and don't want to spend it to get Blessing of the Moon Goddess. And legendary play to the rescue right there. So yeah, between these abilities, I'm going to feel like I'm ice skating around the pitch, and that is absolutely what I'm looking for. And that might be a good point to move on to Snowball. So I am super happy they kept it. It's so amazingly thematic. It's it's such a draw to why I like Skatha. So yeah, I'm really pleased that she's still got it. And oh my goodness, I love it. It can be overstated, but it's just so fun. So it's easy to overshadow this with the Blessing. But the ability to pull off a 4-inch dodge for Skatha or a teammate, or bank of momentum at any point, is just good. And with the Season 4 changes to passing and shooting, making it easier to succeed when at half range, this has got a little bit more reliable. I think the main use for that will be in trying to free up a teammate who's in trouble. If Skatha just kind of gets to within range, she can pass into that engagement a bit more reliably. And the momentum you now get on the first turn could make getting a bonus timed first shot more easy. Although I suspect you'll be using the Snowball for the dodges. But otherwise, that's really more or less the same as before. The new addition is the fact that you can now score VP with the Snowball, which I think is fantastically thematic and fun. Love the image of that. And it's sort of interesting to think how that's going to really affect the game. On the one hand, I think maybe not a lot, as she can only score 1 goal per turn as her activation ends after she shoots, or at least after she scores it. And if I was going to be shooting, I'd like to be scoring 4 points rather than 1, and trying to engineer that. But at the same time, it's going to be pretty hard to 12-0 Skatha, as if she's on the pitch, there's a pretty good likelihood she can get a point. Where I really think it'll come in is in games where you're on uneven score, either through mascot kill or if bear hug stays the same and you get an extra point for a kill. Then I think it might come in. Let's say if you're on 11 points. Getting that last point now becomes pretty trivially easy to close out the game, whereas you might before be trying to chase that last kill. On the other hand, having Skatha hanging around in midfield and disrupting things and just popping away a couple of goals over the course of the game, it's the same as her having a kill for much less effort, potentially. Although without the benefit of pressuring your opponent's positioning. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in reality. It's super jank, whatever happens. And before I forget, can't get goal inference from this for reasons that I'm sure will be written somewhere. So those are her kind of big beneficial changes. I'm going to delve a little bit into what I see as her weaknesses or kind of less strong aspects. So damage output. She was never great at damage, and the two damage on 3 successes she had before is not bad. It's not bad. I've killed players with her before when they were super ganged out and snared and all the good stuff. But she can put out damage when she needs to. But the subtle changes to her playbook and the and more her play style, I think have now decreased her output. In terms of play style, I think you're much less going to be going for the damage option, as she's now got far more tools to get around and try to chase that ball. But equally, she's lost a bit of damage on the wrap, as the tackle and the 1 damage have switched over. I know which one I prefer. So yeah, it's not a big deal. She can still do the knockdown if she gets lucky or gets some bonuses, which is nothing to be snooted at. And actually, if we're talking about damage, let's talk about Cold Snap, which is slightly better now, and this probably goes into a pros column for her damage output. But yeah, so it does 2 damage now instead of 1. Gets around that tough hide and lets you blink away at a couple of models underneath that template. The range is slightly shorter, but to be honest, I don't think that really matters. I very rarely was using the full extent of the range anyway. The playbook result has moved down her playbook to column 3, so it's achievable now with if you get a nice roll just from a normal attack, and I think a serious consideration if you wrap. In my experience, Skatha wants to be doing a Cold Snap once per turn anyway, and normally that's just by buying it with a hard cast of 2 influence, and I still think she'll be doing that, but slightly easier on the playbook is slightly easier on the playbook. And while potentially she needs snared a little bit less than before, as now her 1 column is really what I'm going to be looking at hitting most of the time. Her teammates love snared and the enemy teams hate it, so we will still want to be putting it out. So yes, her damage has dropped slightly and it doesn't matter. Another potential weakness I was chatting with friends about was unpredictable movement got brought up. 1-inch melee is always going to be vulnerable to unpredictable movement. I never really found that too much of a hassle with Skatha, and now that she's got even better at dodging, I predict that'll be even less of a case. Sure, it's annoying, but so long as you've got models around, you can. So enemy models you can pinball off, friendly models you can snowball off. It's not where they go reliable, but it's pretty reliable, and I'm not too worried. A better point I felt was that she's not very independent, and that's kind of always been the case. That's sort of how Skatha plays. She does need her little her minions around her to do that quick passing or kind of dodging around game. And it's difficult to really say much more about that without knowing quite how the other players work. But for sure, she's going to need some players around her to get the most out of her, and I think that's right. Her biggest weakness, in my opinion, is her durability. No changes to her defensive stats. Defense 5 is great, unless your opponent's dice spike, or they get rerolls. However, her kill priority for your opponent has really gone up, as she is just so much more dangerous than she was before. So expect them to come gunning for her much harder than they did, and we all know that she's just a knockdown away from death, as she's going to evaporate in the heat that's going to be coming for her. So I'm really interested to see if Chaska keeps his tough skin, as that armour, 5-1, we all know from Veteran Minx how nice that is. And given how I found Skatha tends to like to play quite centrally in midfield, and I don't think that's changed with her new abilities, anything to make her more durable is going to be a benefit. Finally, I'll close with some thoughts about her core squad. Obviously, it's hard to talk about this not knowing what the other players are really like in their final forms for Season 4. But she'll have to take a mascot, and I really hope Snow is worth taking. I really hope that they do a good job with him or her. I don't know what it is. But Fahad is always great with Zarola, and Zarola is probably going to be my top pick for always take, provided she keeps Midnight Offering, because Midnight Offering is the balls. And with her ability to reposition Skatha to get her out of trouble or move her useful legendary aura around, on top of her defense 5 and unpredictable movement if she keeps those, and ability to link to Fahad, just performing a really nice defensive role for the team. Yeah, I'm pretty certain Zarola is for keeps. Next, Veteran Minx. So damn good in Season 3. It's possible she'll get toned down in Season 4, but I really hope not. So fast, so durable, and the Blessing and Sunfather really helps Skatha with her influence allocations, which is extra nice if you want to be trying to buy Cold Snap, or if you're going to be now using the Blessing of the Moon Goddess. The next pick to my mind is either Ulfa or Cena, and I think that will determine what you want to achieve with the team. If you want all-out goals, or if it's a team that you can't fight into very easily. I reckon going with Ulfa will be the thing, provided they change him in such a way as to make him usable. And I want to make the prediction that that'll be more often than not, because I suspect that if you want to fight something, you go with Theron rather than Skatha. But if you want to go for a more 2-2 or 4 kills, 1 goal game, or are facing a team that's maybe better than you at scoring goals, but squishier, then we bring the bear. Assuming she stays at least as good as she is now, and hopefully better. I doubt that they're both traditionally quite influence-hungry models, and I sort of doubt that that will change, and so I think it might be a bit difficult to fit them both in the team. I could be wrong. So then we've got a pick I think of between Mitagi, J-Car and Minerva, basically depending on your Ulfa Cena choice and who you're playing against. I think Mitagi for maximum goal threat team, and that defense 5. I mean, with Skatha, Fahad, Zarola, Veteran Binks, Mitagi, you got 5 players that have need 5s to hit. So in a keep away, goal scoring, durable team, I think that's a pretty good start. Not to mention I really like Mitagi. For more of a balance of goal threat and takeout threat, good old J-Car. I'm hoping for him. I'm hoping he stays still good. I'm sure he will do. I understand Guttenstring has been toned down a bit, but hopefully he will still act more or less as he has to up until this point. And then I think if you're bringing Cena, then Minerva for that support of I Spy and Harrier. I know Mitagi's got Harrier too, that's also a consideration. But I think Minerva and Cena play well together. So that's really how I see the flex slot, which leaves Hearn, Egret and Chaska unaccounted for. At this point, we don't know what Egret and Chaska look like, but we have seen veteran Hearn. I'm ignoring original Hearn as as traditionally he doesn't really play so well with Skatha unless there's already a forest on the board. So I'm going to assume that veteran Hearn is the pick over original Hearn. And I actually really like all those players. They all have quite useful tools that Skatha can use. In particular, Chaska's got his lovely tough skin to help Skatha survive. That boombox adds to her ability to deal out damage, although it is so costly for momentum or influence. Egret's nice to have into teams that like to clump up, and with Veteran Hearn's new incarnation, more easily able to generate momentum, and much quicker with his teleport for some janky ball retrieval and goal scoring. I'm definitely not writing them off, but aspects of their character design don't fit so well with Skatha, and as they tend to be either too slow, in the case of Hearn and Chaska, or too vulnerable in case of all of them, giving up those easy kills that Skatha can't really afford to, and providing more or less unnecessary damage support. So Egret's flurry and poison, it does good damage over the course of the game, it whittles away, but if you've got no finisher, as Skatha tends not to, then that doesn't really matter too much and it's a bit of wasted influence. Similarly with Chaska's boombox, it's great, but it's not enough on its own, and Skatha doesn't tend to have the follow-up. Hearn tends to take too much setup and influence allocation to really get to his big damage, and even then it's not that impressive. And that hasn't really changed in his new form. And yes, you might say his new teleportability does make him much faster, does give him that kind of positioning and ball playing abilities that will fit with Skatha's team. Yes, I agree, but it comes at a cost of either using a lot of momentum to fuel it or taking influence away from the rest of the team, and traditionally that's not what Hearn is good for. Hearn's good for being a battery and providing that influence to fuel Skatha or J-Car or Ulfa, who can much more easily score the big points, and him eating into that makes me concerned. Don't get me wrong, I think he's great in Falconers, but for Skatha we'll have to test it out, we'll have to see, but I'm not convinced at this point in time. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think. If you've spotted any cool interactions or abilities, I'd love to hear them. But until then, let's all look forward to Skatha in Season 4. Take care.